The first time Captain Elias Reed saw her, the air around him seemed to stop. The battlefield had fallen silent, ash drifting like snow, the smell of ozone and burnt steel heavy in the air. And there she stood, the alien queen. Her name, whispered in human tongues, was Seraphine. Her silver armor shimmered beneath the fractured sky, reflecting the dying light of two suns. She looked neither cruel nor kind, only impossibly calm. The soldiers behind Elias trembled, unsure if they were witnessing the end of their world or the beginning of something else entirely. And in that strange silence, Elias did something unthinkable. He smiled, and then, without reason, without plan, without permission, he said softly, "You're beautiful." The words escaped him before his mind could catch them. They weren't spoken in strategy nor in surrender. They were raw truth, drawn from the strange stillness of that moment. Her eyes, bright and liquid like moonlit water, widened just a fraction. The queen of the Veyari, conqueror of 7 worlds, destroyer of human fleets, blinked as though she'd never been spoken to like that before. Her guards stirred, their glaives humming. Elias's second-in-command, Lieutenant Mara, hissed under her breath, "Sir, what are you doing?" But Seraphine raised a hand, silencing her soldiers. Her gaze never left Elias. "You think beauty exists?" she said, her voice layered with strange harmonics, as if two beings spoke through one throat. "Even now?" Elias swallowed hard. "I think it's what keeps us from giving up." A long pause. Then something entirely unexpected. A soft laugh, faint as starlight, escaped her lips. It was the first sound of warmth anyone had ever heard from her. That single exchange marked the end of the war. No weapon, no surrender agreement, no diplomatic plea, just a moment of human honesty that reached across the void. Within weeks, Seraphine called for a ceasefire. She demanded peace talks, and for reasons no one understood, she requested that Captain Elias Reed be among the human representatives. He accepted, though everyone warned him it could be a trap. Now, as the diplomatic shuttle entered Veyari orbit, Elias found his hands trembling. Through the viewport spread a world of silver forests and oceans that glowed faintly from beneath, an alien beauty that defied everything he knew. "Captain Reed," said the shuttle pilot quietly. "Why did she ask for you?" Elias smiled faintly. "Maybe because I was foolish enough to speak like a human when everyone else was trying to sound like soldiers." When the shuttle landed, the Queen was already waiting. No throne, no guards this time. Just her, beneath a crystalline archway that scattered light into rainbows. She looked different now. Not smaller, but gentler somehow, like the calm after a storm. "Captain," she said, inclining her head, "the man who stopped the stars from burning." He chuckled awkwardly. "I think you give me too much credit, Your Majesty." Her lips curved. "Perhaps, or perhaps not enough." They began to walk through her city, its towers grown from living crystal, its streets humming with quiet energy. Her people watched from a distance, curious and cautious. Every few steps, Seraphine glanced at him. Not with the calculating gaze of a ruler, but with something almost uncertain. At last she spoke. "You said something to me that day, something no enemy ever dared." "I remember," Elias replied softly. "I said you were beautiful." She stopped walking. The light shimmered around her as she turned to face him. "Why?" she asked simply. Elias hesitated, his breath catching. "Because it was true. And because maybe I wanted you to see that even in war, there's still something worth saving." Her eyes glistened faintly, though no tear fell. "You are strange human. Maybe that's what makes us human," he said. And for the first time the Queen smiled, not as a conqueror, not as an alien, but as someone who, for a brief heartbeat, understood what it meant to be seen. That was the day everything began to change between them, between worlds, between hearts that were never meant to meet. Peace had never sounded so strange. For centuries, the hum of Veyari warships had been the background noise of humanity's survival. Now there was only quiet, the uneasy quiet of two civilizations staring at each other across a fragile line, trying to remember how not to fight. Elias Reed was at the heart of that silence. Every day he walked the gleaming corridors of Seraphine's palace, surrounded by impossible beauty. Walls grown from light, floors that rippled like water under his steps. Yet all of it felt like walking through a dream he didn't quite belong to. Seraphine met him each morning in the same place, a balcony overlooking the radiant sea. It shimmered like liquid glass, reflecting constellations even in daylight. The first few days were awkward. She spoke little. He spoke too much. But gradually words became easier. On the 7th morning, she asked him, "Do you regret it?" "Regret what?" he replied. "Calling me beautiful." He looked at her, sunlight breaking against her silver hair. "No," he said quietly. "It was the truest thing I ever said." She turned away, her expression unreadable. "You confuse me, Captain Reed." "Good," he said, smiling faintly. "That means you're thinking like us." For a long while they simply stood together, the waves whispering below. It was strange how comfortable silence could be between two beings who once tried to destroy each other. But the Queen's advisors were less calm. One evening, Elias was summoned to the council hall. Dozens of alien eyes fixed on him, some cold, some openly hostile. At the center stood High Consul Thren, a being of towering height and golden skin. "You speak with our queen too freely," Thren said, his voice sharp as wind through metal. "She listens to you too deeply." "That is dangerous." Elias kept his tone steady. "If peace is dangerous, maybe you've been at war too long." The hall rippled with offended murmurs. But before Thren could reply, Seraphine entered. Her presence silenced the chamber like a sudden storm. "Enough," she said simply. "The human speaks because I allow it." Thren bowed stiffly, but his voice dripped with warning. "Your Majesty, remember what humans are. Their words are weapons dressed as warmth." When the council dismissed, Seraphine lingered. Elias turned to her, voice low. "Your people don't trust me. They trust nothing that bleeds," she said softly. Then after a pause, "Once I didn't either." He smiled gently. "And now?" Her gaze softened, though she didn't answer. That night, Elias found himself unable to sleep. The palace windows glowed with the faint light of the ocean below, and outside he could see Seraphine standing alone on the terrace. He hesitated, then stepped out to join her. The air was cool, the alien constellations vast above. "You should rest," he said quietly. "So should you," she replied without turning. "Yet here we stand," he chuckled softly. "Maybe peace makes us restless." Her voice was almost a whisper. "You changed something inside me, Elias. That day on the battlefield, I was ready to end your world. But when you called me beautiful, it was as if I remembered something I'd forgotten." He studied her face in the faint light. "What did you remember?" Her eyes, bright as molten crystal, met his. "That before I was queen, I was alive." Elias didn't know what to say. Words felt too small. "Your people think love is weakness," he said finally. "Ours think it's the only strength that matters. Maybe that's where peace begins." Seraphine's expression softened further. "Perhaps," she whispered. "But if peace begins there, then I'm afraid of how much it will cost." They stood together, two silhouettes beneath alien stars. No longer enemies, not yet friends. Just two souls on opposite sides of history, finding something dangerously human between them. In that moment, Elias understood. The war might have ended, but the hardest battle had just begun, the one fought not with ships or weapons, but with hearts that dared to feel. The days that followed felt like waking up in a dream that refused to fade. Every morning, Elias and Seraphine met on the same balcony above the sea that glowed like quiet fire. Every conversation pulled them closer, though neither dared to name what it was. The queen had begun to change, and everyone saw it. She no longer wore her crown of crystal thorns. Her once perfect armor was replaced with softer robes that shimmered like dawn. The ministers whispered in corners, unsure whether this was peace or madness. One morning, Elias noticed her hands trembling slightly as she lifted a cup of shimmering liquid. "You're tired," he said gently. Her lips curved faintly. "Queens do not get tired." "Even queens are allowed to be human sometimes," he said before catching himself. "I mean," she smiled, the smallest, most fragile smile he'd ever seen. "It's all right, Captain. Perhaps you're right. Perhaps being human is not such a curse." They both laughed softly, though the sound faded into a thoughtful silence. He looked over the horizon. "Your world is beautiful," he murmured. "It feels alive." "It is," she said quietly. "Our cities grow, breathe, heal. The Vayari do not build with stone or steel. We grow with patience." Maybe that's what humanity forgot, Elias said, his voice low. We build faster than our hearts can keep up. Her gaze lingered on him. Your people are driven by something we never understood, hope without proof. He met her eyes. And yours? Memory without mercy. The words settled between them heavy as truth. That night, Elias received an encrypted message from Earth Command. Read. Return immediately. Negotiations stalled. Vayari factions hostile. Trust no one. He read it twice. The letters cold against his chest. He looked out the window where the alien sea whispered below, glowing with colors no human eye had words for. Could he trust her? He found her waiting in the Hall of Stars, a vast chamber filled with orbs of light, each representing a conquered world. Her fingers traced one sphere gently, the light pulsing at her touch. This one was called Loom, she said softly. It burned for 1,000 years. My ancestors took it for its oceans. Now it's silent. Her voice trembled, and for the first time Elias saw not a queen but a woman haunted by the weight of her crown. Seraphine, he said quietly. You could end this. You could stop the hate before it destroys you too. She looked at him sharply. Do you think I haven't tried? My council sees your species as disease. They will not listen to my heart. Then speak from your soul, he said. Theirs will follow if they still have one. Her expression faltered. And if I fail? He stepped closer, his voice steady. Then you'll have tried. That's more than most ever do. Her eyes glistened. You speak as if faith is a weapon. It's the only one I have left, he said. There was a long silence, then, unexpectedly, she placed her hand over his. The contact was electric, light against warmth, alien against human. Elias, she whispered, his name sounding strange yet sacred in her voice. You make me forget what I was made to be. He didn't move, afraid even breathing would break the moment. Then maybe, he said softly, that's what peace really is. Forgetting what we were made for and choosing what we want to be. Her breath trembled, and for a fleeting instant, the great queen of the Vayari looked almost fragile, like someone standing at the edge of a cliff, unsure whether to fall or fly. But beyond the chamber doors, unseen eyes watched them, glinting with envy, fear, and betrayal. And far above, hidden in the dark side of the moon, the human fleet stirred, uncertain whether peace was salvation or surrender. The word beautiful, spoken once on a battlefield, had rippled across galaxies, and now it was about to test the courage of two hearts and the fate of two worlds. Peace, Elias realized, was far more fragile than war. The talks had stretched for weeks, and though the queen tried to hold her court together, shadows grew longer behind her throne. The council had begun to fracture, some whispering that Seraphine was no longer fit to rule, others claiming she had been corrupted by the human tongue. Elias saw the exhaustion in her eyes, though she never admitted it. She still wore dignity like armor, but he could sense the storm beneath her calm. One evening, as they stood watching the twilight spread across the silver horizon, she said quietly, They are planning something. Elias frowned. Who? My own advisors, she replied. They think I've forgotten the old ways. They forget that I remember everything. Can you stop them? Her voice was barely a whisper. I don't know. The sea shimmered below them, serene and unaware of the gathering threat. Elias took a slow breath. Then let me help you. She looked at him sharply. You would stand against your own commanders and mine? He smiled faintly. I'd stand for what's right. That's supposed to be the point, isn't it? For a moment something flickered behind her expression. Something almost human. You are too brave for your kind, she murmured. Or too foolish. Probably both, he said with a half-smile. That night, the first explosion shattered the silence. The palace trembled. Crystals fell from the ceiling like shards of frozen light. From the balcony, Elias saw plumes of fire erupting across the lower city. Mutineers, soldiers loyal to Thren, rising in defiance of their queen. Seraphine's guards rushed into the chamber. Your Majesty, the inner gates have fallen. She turned, calm but fierce. Evacuate the civilians. Seal the archives. And you, my queen? I will not hide. Elias stepped beside her. Then neither will I. The guards hesitated, uncertain whether to stop him. But the queen's gesture silenced them. He stays, she said firmly. He stands beside me. Together they moved through the burning corridors. The air smelled of ozone and molten glass. Veyari soldiers clashed in the halls, armor against armor, blue light against flame. In the chaos, Elias saw Thren leading the revolt, his eyes burning with fanatic light. "You turned our queen into a traitor, human," he shouted, voice echoing like thunder. "Now I'll save her from herself." Before Elias could move, Thren's weapon ignited, a staff of pulsing energy. He struck at Seraphine, but she met him with her bare hand, catching the blade mid-arc. Energy flared around her fingers, light splitting the floor beneath them. Her voice was cold, commanding, divine. Enough, but Thren was beyond reason. "You fell in love with a beast." The word hung like poison in the air. Seraphine froze for the briefest instant, and that hesitation was enough. Thren struck again, the weapon grazing her side. She staggered, the wound glowing faintly as though light itself leaked from her veins. "Seraphine!" Elias caught her before she fell. Her breath trembled, pain flickering through her composure. Yet even wounded, she raised her hand, summoning a wave of pure energy that hurled Thren backward into the shattered pillars. When the silence finally returned, she turned to Elias, pale but steady. "It seems peace has enemies on every side." He looked at her wound. "You're bleeding light," she almost smiled. "That's all we are, Elias. Light and memory." He tore part of his uniform, pressing it against the wound. "Then I'll help you keep both." Her eyes met his, shimmering with something too deep for words. "Why?" she whispered. "Because you showed me that enemies can care, that beauty can survive war." For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, human and alien, broken and burning, yet alive in the midst of chaos. And when the palace lights dimmed and the fires quieted, Elias realized something unspoken had changed between them forever. The war outside might rage again, but inside that shattered palace, peace had found a heartbeat. The palace was in ruins. Smoke hung like ghosts in the air, and the once shining halls now echoed with the groans of a wounded world. Yet amid the rubble, Seraphine stood, battered, bleeding light but unbroken. Elias stayed close beside her as med drones hummed around the injured. The city outside had quieted, but the silence felt deceptive, like a tide drawing breath before another wave. "Thren's forces have retreated beyond the northern ridge," a Veyari officer reported, bowing low. "But they hold the communication spires. Without them, the council will believe the queen is dead." Seraphine straightened, ignoring the pain. "Then they will learn otherwise." "Your Majesty," the officer hesitated. "You can't go out there." "I can," she said, voice steady. "And I will." When the soldier left, Elias stepped closer. "You're hurt. You need rest." She turned to him, and for once she didn't hide the exhaustion on her face. "If I rest now, I lose everything." He met her eyes. "Then at least don't lose yourself." She paused. "You sound as if you care too much." "Maybe I do," he said softly. "But you taught me that caring changes more than orders ever could." For a moment, something tender flickered in her expression, a warmth so fragile it almost hurt to see. "And you taught me," she whispered, "that mercy isn't weakness." Before he could reply, her guard entered again. "The spires are fortified. A direct assault would be suicide." Seraphine looked to Elias. "Then we'll need something better than war." He frowned. "You have an idea?" Her silver eyes glinted. "You came from a race that wins through chaos. Teach me how humans fight without fighting." He smiled faintly. "That's called hope." So they devised a plan. Not one of destruction, but of truth. At dusk, the queen and Elias left the palace in disguise, wearing cloaks of shifting light. They crossed the glowing plains through forests that hummed with strange bioluminescence. The alien sky shimmered above them, its constellations foreign but mesmerizing. As they walked, Seraphine broke the quiet. "When I was young," she said softly, "I was told our kind were born to command, not to feel. I believed that for so long, until one word from a human shattered it." He smiled gently. "Beautiful?" She nodded. "You said it as though it was a truth that didn't need to be earned." "It wasn't meant to be earned," Elias said. "It was meant to be seen." They reached the ridge where Thren's rebels had taken position. From afar, the comm spires stood tall, piercing the clouds. "Once we reach that signal tower," Elias said, "you can broadcast your voice to the entire planet." She exhaled slowly. "And if they no longer believe in me?" He looked at her with quiet certainty. "Then believe in yourself for once. Let them see the woman who chose peace over power. They moved in silence through the canyons, the night glowing faintly around them. But when they reached the final approach, the sound of footsteps echoed. Patrols. They hid behind a fractured crystal outcrop, their breaths shallow. The patrol passed within meters. Elias held his breath, his hand brushing against hers. The touch was brief, accidental, yet it sent a jolt through both of them. When the soldiers were gone, neither moved for a moment. "You're trembling," she whispered. He smiled faintly. Not from fear. Her gaze lingered on him, searching, almost fearful of the answer she already knew. "Elias, if we survive this, what happens then?" He met her eyes. "Then maybe the universe stops fighting for a moment. Maybe that's enough." Before she could answer, they reached the spire's base. She placed her palm on the crystal console, her light merging with the tower's pulse. "People of Veari," she said, her voice echoing across the world. "You were told that peace was weakness. You were told that I fell, but I did not fall, I chose. I chose compassion over conquest. I chose the truth over the silence of fear. And if that makes me less a queen, then let me be more a soul." All across the planet her voice rippled, into the hearts of warriors, into the minds of children. Elias watched her with quiet awe. For a moment she wasn't an alien queen or an enemy. She was simply Seraphine, the being who dared to feel. When the broadcast ended, she looked at him with tears of light in her eyes. Now the world will decide if love was worth it. The world trembled, not from weapons, but from choice. For the first time in 1,000 years, the Veari had heard their queen speak not as a ruler, but as a soul. Her message rippled across the planet like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. And yet, for every heart she reached, another turned against her. Elias and Seraphine hid among the crystal ridges, waiting for a response. The wind hummed low, carrying the scent of ionized air. Above them, the twin suns began to rise, painting the sky in molten gold. She stood silent, watching the horizon. Her shoulders were square, but he could feel the tremor in her breath. "What if they don't answer?" she whispered. "They already have," Elias said softly. "You just can't hear it yet." He wanted to believe it, but even as he spoke, distant explosions shimmered on the skyline. "Rebel ships, Thren's forces closing in." "They're coming," Elias said. "You have to move." Seraphine turned toward the spire, her hand still faintly glowing from the broadcast. "No, if I run now, my people will see only a fleeing queen. Let them see me stand." "You'll die," he said, stepping closer. She looked at him, her silver eyes soft but resolute. "Then let them see me die for peace." "Don't talk like that," Elias said, his voice breaking. "We didn't come this far to lose you." She studied him in silence, the dawn catching on her silver hair. "Why does it matter so much to you, Elias Reed?" He hesitated. "Because you made me remember what humanity means. And I can't watch that light fade again." For a heartbeat, her expression softened. "You always speak as if your words are alive," she murmured. Perhaps that's why they changed things. Before he could reply, a rumble split the air, a shuttle descending fast. He turned, weapon ready, but the insignia wasn't Veari. It was human. The bay door opened, and Lieutenant Mara stepped out, her armor scorched from battle. "Captain Reed," she shouted. "Command ordered your extraction. Earth's fleet is moving in. This planet's going to burn." Elias froze. "What?" "Central Command lost patience," she said grimly. "They think the Queen's stalling. They're preparing orbital bombardment. We need to leave now." Seraphine's eyes darkened. "Your people come to finish what mine began." Elias's chest tightened. Mara called them off. "I can't," she said. "They won't listen to me." "You're the only one they might." He turned to Seraphine, his heart pounding. "If I go, I can stop this. I can talk to them, but—" Her voice was quiet. "But if you leave, I may not survive." The choice sliced through him like a blade. Between duty and heart, between his world and hers. "I promised you peace," he whispered. "And I meant it." "Then keep your promise," she said gently. "Even if it takes you away from me." He looked at her for a long moment. The queen who had once been his enemy, now the one he couldn't imagine losing. Then slowly he reached out, brushing his hand against hers. "I'll come back," he said. "I swear it." Her fingers lingered around his, light pulsing faintly beneath her skin. "You already did," she whispered. "You came back to what I thought I'd lost. Hope." He turned. forcing himself to step onto the shuttle ramp. Mara followed, the engines roaring to life. As the ship rose, he looked down through the viewport. Seraphine stood alone by the tower, her cloak fluttering in the rising wind, silver against firelight. Around her, the sky began to fill with the dark shapes of human warships, huge, cold, and merciless. "Command won't listen," Mara said over the comms. "They're ready to strike in 3 minutes." Elias clenched his fists. "Then they'll have to listen to me." He opened a direct channel to the fleet, his voice ringing through static. "This is Captain Reed, abort the strike. You're about to destroy the one thing we've fought for since the first shot was fired. Understanding." Static. Then a cold reply. "Stand down, Captain. Orders are final." He stared at the console, his jaw tightening. "Then they're wrong." He cut the transmission and turned to Mara. "Take us in." "Right over the palace. I'll speak from there." Mara's eyes widened. "That's suicide." Elias's voice was steady. "So is silence." Below, Seraphine looked up, the rising sun gleaming on her armor. She could see his shuttle turning back, against all logic, against all orders. And in that instant, she understood. The human who called her beautiful wasn't just defying death. He was defying the universe itself. The human fleet loomed above the alien skies, black silhouettes against the twin suns. From orbit, they looked like angels of judgment. From the ground, they looked like the end of everything. Seraphine stood beneath the rising storm, her eyes fixed on the heavens. Around her, the remnants of her loyal guard formed a protective circle, their armor dimmed, their hope thinner than air. The sea behind her shimmered faintly, as if the planet itself held its breath. Then, through the roaring wind, a sound rose from above. A single human shuttle broke formation, diving straight through the clouds. Elias Reed had returned. The sight of it drew gasps from her soldiers. To the Queen, it felt like watching the impossible, like hope falling back to earth in fire and light. He landed beside the broken spire, stepping out into the wind. His uniform was torn, his face streaked with smoke and resolve. "I told you I'd come back," he said, voice hoarse but steady. Seraphine's lips trembled with a smile she couldn't suppress. "You never learned when to stop." "Neither did you," he said gently. "That's why we're still here." But above them, the sky flared, human warships aligning. Command had ignored his calls. The bombardment countdown had begun. Mara's voice came over his comm, desperate. "Elias, they won't cancel." "Impact in 100 seconds. Seraphine turned to him, her expression calm in the chaos. "Then this is where it ends?" "No," Elias said. "Not like this." He stepped forward, activating the comm beacon on his chest, broadcasting across every human and Vayari frequency. His voice carried through the storm, clear and unwavering. "This is Captain Elias Reed. To every human, to every Vayari, stop. Look where we stand. We've both bled, we've both lost, but for the first time in our history, we understand each other. Don't erase that. Don't silence what cost us so much to find." He turned to Seraphine, his words soft but fierce. "We have a chance to end something bigger than war. Don't let it fade." For a moment, there was only silence. Then, through the static, another voice answered. Admiral Cassian, cold and controlled. "Captain Reed, you're out of line." Elias exhaled. Then maybe the line was wrong. The Queen stepped forward, placing her hand over his. Together, they faced the sky. Her voice joined his, harmonic, layered, echoing across both worlds. "If destruction is all you understand, then destroy us. But know this, you will burn not your enemies. But the only proof that light can survive the dark." The countdown stopped. Silence swept across the channels, then, slowly, one by one, the human ships began to power down their cannons. The Vayari armadas that had been rising in defense went still. For the first time in centuries, the stars were quiet. Mara's voice broke the silence. "Command has stood down. The war, it's over." Elias's breath caught. He turned to Seraphine, who stood trembling, light glistening in her eyes. "You did it," he whispered. She shook her head faintly. "We did." The next hours passed like a dream. Messages of ceasefire spread across the galaxy. The Queen's speech echoed through the networks, words of unity, compassion, and courage. And though both species had scars too deep to count, something new had taken root. Trust. Days later, under a quiet dawn, Elias stood once more on that same balcony where it all began. Seraphine joined him, her wound healed, her crown gone. The council offered me power again, she said softly. I refused. Power without heart isn't peace, it's just another war waiting to begin. He smiled. Then what will you do? She turned toward the horizon where the light met the sea. Build something worth remembering. And me? He asked quietly, her eyes softened. You already have. A gentle wind passed between them. She reached out, taking his hand in hers. The gesture was simple, human, alien, and infinite all at once. When you called me beautiful, she whispered, I didn't understand the word. Now I do. It wasn't about what you saw. It was about what you believed could still exist. Elias's throat tightened. And what's that? She smiled, eyes reflecting the twin suns. Hope. The ocean shimmered beneath them, its surface mirroring the sky. Two worlds, once enemies, now reflected in one another, and far above the stars seemed to hum softly, as if remembering the day when a single human word, beautiful, was enough to stop a war.